The girl who stayed when everyone else walked away. The night rain had turned the city streets into rivers of blurred neon and broken reflections. Ambulance sirens echoed through the narrow downtown roads, cutting through the chaos of traffic and late-night crowds. Inside one of those ambulances lay a man who looked like he belonged anywhere but here. Tall, powerful, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit now stained with rain and blood. His name was Adrian Vale. And most people in the world didn't know he wasn't fully human. Across from him sat Lena Reyes, pressing folded gauze gently against his wound while paramedics rushed around her. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't family. She wasn't rich. She wasn't important. She was just the girl who refused to walk away. 3 hours earlier, Lena had been leaving her late shift at a small hospital cafeteria. Her shoes were worn, her coat thin against the cold, and her mind busy calculating whether she could afford groceries and rent this month. Then she saw him collapse outside the emergency entrance. Everyone else hesitated. She ran. She didn't know why. Something instinctive, something deeper than logic, pulled her forward. When she reached him, his skin felt strangely cold for someone who had just collapsed from what looked like blood loss. "Stay with me," she whispered, pressing her scarf against the wound on his side. His eyes had opened then. Dark, ancient, terrifying, and exhausted. For a second she felt like prey being studied by something powerful and dangerous. But then he blinked slowly, and she saw pain. Real pain. Human pain. That was enough. Inside the hospital emergency ward, doctors rushed Adrian into trauma care. Lena followed until a nurse physically stopped her. Family only. She stepped back immediately, embarrassed. Of course. She was nobody to him. But she didn't leave. She sat in the waiting room for hours, hands clasped, silently hoping the stranger she found bleeding in the rain would survive. Around midnight, expensive shoes clicked across the tile floor. A woman entered like she owned the building. Tall. Perfect makeup. Designer coat. Cold eyes. She walked straight to the front desk. "I'm here for Adrian Vale." The nurse's expression changed instantly. "Yes, ma'am. He's stable. They're closing the wound now." The woman sighed dramatically. "Good. I told him to stop these reckless night walks." Then her gaze shifted. To Lena. Slow. Judgmental. "Sure. And you are?" Lena stood awkwardly. "I found him outside." The woman gave a thin smile. "How charitable." Lena swallowed. "I just didn't want him to be alone." "Well," the woman said coolly, "you've done enough." She turned back to the desk like Lena no longer existed. "I'm Vanessa Hale. His girlfriend." The word felt heavy in the air. Lena nodded quietly and sat back down, trying to ignore the strange tight feeling in her chest. She told herself it was nothing. Just adrenaline. Just exhaustion. Just disappointment she didn't understand. 30 minutes later, a doctor approached Vanessa. "He lost a lot of blood. He'll need monitoring overnight. We also found something unusual in his blood work." Vanessa waved dismissively. "Just stabilize him. I'll handle everything else." Lena noticed the doctor hesitate, like he wanted to say more. But he walked away. That was the first moment something felt wrong. 2 hours later, security approached Lena. "I'm sorry, miss. Family only overnight." Her cheeks burned. "Of course." She stood, grabbed her bag and walked outside into the freezing rain. But she didn't go home. She sat under the hospital awning, watching the ambulance lights reflect across wet pavement. Something inside her refused to leave. She didn't know why. Around 3 a.m., a nurse rushed outside with a phone pressed to her ear. Yes, his levels dropped again. No, she refused the second transfusion. "I know, but..." The nurse stopped when she saw Lena. "Sorry," she said quickly and went back inside. Lena's stomach twisted. Refused transfusion? Who would refuse life-saving treatment? Unless someone wanted him weak. At sunrise, hospital staff rushed inside suddenly. Lena stood. Something was wrong. Minutes later, alarms sounded faintly through the glass doors. She didn't think. She ran inside. No one stopped her. Chaos filled the ICU hallway. Nurses ran. Doctors shouted orders. And in the middle of it, Vanessa stood arguing with a senior physician. "You can't override me. He will die without this." I said no more blood. Lena froze. Why would someone refuse blood for someone they loved? Unless... Fear crawled up her spine. Before Lena could think, Adrian's heart monitor flatlined inside the room. Something inside her snapped. She pushed past everyone. Doctors yelled. Security shouted. But she ran straight into the room. Adrian lay pale, unmoving. Machine screamed warnings. And for one impossible second, his eyes opened and locked onto hers. Not Vanessa's. Hers. Something ancient moved behind those eyes. Something powerful. Something hungry. But also something terrified. Like he was drowning. And she was the only thing anchoring him to the world. She grabbed his hand. "I'm here," she whispered. The room temperature dropped. Monitors glitched. Lights flickered. The doctor shouted, "What is happening?" Adrian inhaled sharply. The heart monitor jumped back to life. Outside the room, Vanessa stared in horror. Because she knew something Lena didn't. Adrian wasn't just rich. He wasn't just powerful. He was the last living heir of one of the oldest vampire royal bloodlines. And somehow, the human girl holding his hand had just called him back from death. 2 hours later, Adrian was stable. Doctors called it a miracle. Vanessa called it a problem. And Lena tried to quietly leave before anyone could question her. But a deep voice stopped her in the hallway. "Don't go." She turned. Adrian stood there, pale but upright, for still attached, watching her like she was the only thing grounding him to reality. "Stay," he said quietly. And for the first time in centuries, the Vampire King felt safe. But neither of them knew yet that Vanessa had already made a deal with enemies who wanted Adrian dead. And Lena was the one human in the world his blood recognized as fate. The blood that recognized her. The hospital corridors smelled like antiseptic, fear, and secrets no one was saying out loud. Adrian Vale stood near the ICU doorway, pale but unshakably composed, like a king forced into a mortal disguise. The early morning light spilled through the tall windows behind him, painting his sharp features in gold and shadow. The 4 lines still connected to his arm, but he stood like a man who refused to look weak, even when death had brushed against him hours earlier. Across from him, Lena froze. She hadn't expected him to be awake. She definitely hadn't expected him to be standing. And she absolutely hadn't expected him to be looking at her like she was the only thing anchoring him to this world. "Don't leave," he said again, voice low, rough, like it hurt to speak. Lena swallowed. "You should be resting." "I will," he said. "If you stay." The words were simple, but they landed like something ancient and binding. Behind them, nurses exchanged confused glances. One whispered, "How is he even walking?" Another whispered back, "His recovery makes no medical sense." Neither of them noticed how the hallway lights flickered once, then steadied. Lena stepped closer slowly. "You scared everyone," she said softly. His gaze softened, barely. "You stayed." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. And something about that made her chest tighten. "I didn't want you to be alone," she said. For a moment, something raw passed across Adrian's face. Relief. Gratitude so deep it almost looked like pain. Behind them, Vanessa Hale watched from the end of the hallway. Her nails dug into her palm. Because she had seen what happened inside that room. The way the machine stabilized the moment Lena touched him. The way his body, vampire blood and all, responded to her like she was oxygen. That wasn't supposed to happen. Not with a human. Not ever. Inside Adrian's hospital room later that morning, silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged. Like something invisible sat between them, watching, waiting. "You shouldn't be here," Adrian said finally. Lena blinked. "You told me to stay." "I did." He exhaled slowly. "And I'm glad you did." He looked down at his hands like they were foreign to him. "People around me usually stay because they want something." She frowned. "I don't." "I know," he said quietly. And that might have been the most dangerous truth of all. A knock interrupted them. A tall man in a charcoal suit entered without waiting for permission. His presence felt heavy. Not human. His eyes flicked to Lena, assessing, calculating. Then to Adrian. "My lord," he said under his breath. Lena blinked. "My lord?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "Not here, Marcus." Marcus inclined his head. "Of course." But his gaze went back to Lena. And something like shock crossed his face. Because he could smell it. Royal blood, reacting to human scent like recognition. Like claiming. Like destiny. Impossible. Unless... "I'll wait outside," Lena said quickly, sensing tension she didn't understand. Adrian caught her wrist gently. "Stay." Marcus's eyebrows lifted. That one word changed everything. Marcus cleared his throat. "The council knows." Adrian went still. "And?" Adrian asked coldly. "They believe this was an assassination attempt." Lena's heart skipped. "Assassination?" Marcus continued carefully. And they believe someone close to you was involved. The room went silent. Adrian didn't look surprised, just tired. Vanessa, Lena whispered before she could stop herself. Both men looked at her. She flushed. I heard her arguing with doctors about blood transfusions. She refused them. Marcus's expression darkened instantly. Adrian closed his eyes slowly, like a man confirming something he already feared was true. Why would she do that? Lena asked. Adrian opened his eyes again, and for a moment they weren't human. Dark, ancient, predatory. Because, he said quietly, if I died weak, it would look natural. Lena felt cold. Marcus stepped closer to Adrian. We need to move you to the estate immediately. Adrian shook his head once. Not yet. Marcus stared. My lord. Not yet, Adrian repeated. Then his gaze shifted to Lena, and softened in a way Marcus had never seen in 2 centuries of service. Because Adrian could feel it now. Her scent. Her pulse. Her presence. It calmed something feral inside him. Something ancient. Something royal. Marcus spoke carefully. She cannot come with us. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Adrian turned his head slowly. Yes, he said. She can. Marcus inhaled sharply. My lord, if the council finds out. I don't care. The words were quiet, final, terrifying. Lena looked between them. I don't understand what's happening. Adrian looked at her, and for the first time, he told her the truth. I'm not fully human, he said. She stared. He waited for fear, for rejection, for her to run. Instead she asked quietly, Are you dangerous? The question hit him harder than any weapon ever had. Only, he said slowly, to people who hurt the ones I protect. She nodded once. Then I'm not afraid of you. And just like that, 1,000 years of loneliness cracked inside the Vampire King's chest. Outside the hospital, storm clouds gathered. Because word had already spread through the vampire underworld. The king had awakened his blood bond with a human, and the council would never allow that. Not when prophecy said, the human chosen by royal blood could either save their species, or end it forever. Across the city, Vanessa Hale sat in a black luxury car, speaking into a burner phone. Yes, she said coldly. He survived. Was no worse. Her eyes hardened. He found her. The night the Vampire King chose her. The rain had stopped by evening, but the city felt wrong. Too quiet. Like the air itself was holding its breath. Inside Adrian's private hospital suite, the lights were dimmed, curtains half closed. Lena sat in the chair beside his bed, pretending to read a magazine she hadn't turned the page of in 20 minutes. Across the room, Marcus stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low, tense whispers. Yes, the council has confirmed movement. No, they are not waiting for ceremony approval. Yes, if they strike, it will be tonight. Lena's stomach tightened. She didn't fully understand this world yet, but she understood danger. And danger was coming. Adrian watched her quietly. Even exhausted, even weakened from blood loss, his senses were razor sharp. He could hear her heartbeat, slightly faster than normal. He could smell fear beneath the hospital soap and cafeteria coffee scent that clung to her clothes. And beneath all of it, something that called to his blood. Not hunger. Not prey. Home. It terrified him. Because nothing in 1,000 years had ever felt like that. Lena, he said softly. She looked up instantly. Yes. If something happens tonight, you stay behind Marcus. No matter what. Her chest tightened. Something is going to happen? Marcus ended his call and turned. Yes, he said bluntly. Someone is coming. The room went still. Lena swallowed. Because of you? Marcus shook his head. Because of you. The words hit like ice water. Me, she whispered. Marcus studied her carefully. My king's blood reacted to you. That alone makes you valuable. He hesitated. Or dangerous, depending on who you ask. Adrian's voice dropped. She is neither. The temperature in the room seemed to drop with it. Marcus bowed his head slightly. Of course, my lord. But his eyes still held concern. Outside the hospital, 3 black SUVs rolled silently into the underground parking garage. Doors opened. Figures stepped out. Tall, elegant, deadly. Not human. Members of the Vampire Council's enforcement guard. Back upstairs, every light flickered once. Adrian stood immediately. They're here. Marcus moved to the door. Lena stood too, heart pounding. What do I do? She asked. Adrian looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, fear touched his expression. "Stay alive," he said quietly. The hallway outside erupted into chaos seconds later. Shouting, glass breaking, metal bending, inhuman speed. Marcus opened the door slightly, then slammed it shut again. "5 of them," he said. "Elite guard." Adrian's eyes darkened, not metaphorically. Literally. Black swallowing gold. Vampire King. Awake. "Stay behind me," he told Lena. She nodded, fingers trembling. But she didn't run. The door exploded inward. Wood shattered. 2 figures rushed inside faster than human eyes could track. Adrian moved. Not like a man. Like a storm. The first attacker hit the wall before Lena even processed movement. The second flew backward into medical equipment. Marcus engaged 2 more in the doorway, movements precise, brutal, efficient. The 5th stood still, watching Lena, smiling. "She's the one," the vampire said softly, and lunged for her. Adrian moved faster than sound. His hand closed around the attacker's throat midair, and slammed him into the floor hard enough to crack tile. "Touch her," Adrian said, voice layered with something ancient and monstrous, "and I will end your bloodline." The vampire laughed, even while choking. "The council already voted, my king." He grinned through broken teeth. "She dies tonight." Something inside Adrian snapped. The lights shattered. Every monitor exploded. Windows cracked outward. And Lena felt it, like standing in the center of a hurricane made of power. The vampire guard suddenly froze. Because royal command had filled the room. Primal. Absolute. Unbreakable. "Leave," Adrian said. Not loud. Not angry. Just final. 4 of the attackers fled instantly. The one under Adrian's hand hesitated. Just long enough for Marcus to drive a silver blade through his heart. Silence fell. Broken only by Lena's shaking breath. Adrian turned to her slowly. And immediately softened. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. But tears filled her eyes. "You could have died," she whispered. He stepped closer carefully. "As long as you live," he said quietly, "I would survive it." Marcus looked away. Because kings were not supposed to sound like that. Sirens approached in the distance. Human authorities. Too late to matter. Marcus spoke quickly. "We have to move. No. They will send more." Adrian nodded. Then turned to Lena. "You're coming with me." It wasn't an order. It was fear disguised as certainty. She nodded. "I know." An hour later, a black helicopter lifted into the stormy night sky, carrying a vampire king who had just openly defied his council, and the human girl his blood had chosen. Far below, in a candlelit underground chamber, 12 ancient vampires sat around a stone table. "The bond has begun," one said. "Then we proceed," another replied. "And the girl?" The eldest vampire smiled coldly. "If we cannot control her, we erase her." But none of them knew yet. The bond didn't just tie Lena to Adrian. It was already changing her. Because when she touched his hand inside that helicopter, her eyes flashed gold for a split second. And Adrian saw it. The queen the world tried to destroy. The helicopter cut through storm clouds like a blade through silk. Inside, silence sat heavy between Adrian and Lena, not empty silence, but the kind filled with unspoken truths, fear, and something deeper neither of them fully understood yet. Marcus sat across from them, checking weapons, maps, secure messages flashing across a tablet. But every few seconds, his eyes drifted to Lena, not with suspicion anymore but with something closer to awe and worry. Because he had seen her eyes flash gold. And there was only one legend in vampire history that described that. Below them, mountains emerged through clouds, jagged, ancient, untouched by modern cities. Hidden deep inside them was the last true stronghold of Adrian's bloodline. The Royal Knight Estate. A place built long before modern nations existed. A place where vampire kings were crowned. And sometimes, where wars began. As the helicopter landed on a stone platform carved into the mountain itself, wind howled like something alive. Guards stood waiting, silent, disciplined, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. When Adrian stepped out, every guard bowed instantly. But when Lena stepped out behind him, several froze. Because they felt it too. That strange pull in the air. Like royal blood recognizing something ancient. Something forbidden. Inside the estate, warm golden torchlight replaced storm shadows. Marble floors reflected centuries of power and history. Portraits of past vampire rulers lined the halls, warriors, queens, monsters, legends. Lena walked beside Adrian quietly, trying to hide how small she felt here. But he kept walking slightly closer to her than necessary, subtly shielding her. Like instinct, they stopped in front of two massive black doors. Marcus hesitated. "My lord, once we enter, there is no hiding what she is to you." Adrian didn't look away from Lena. "I know." The doors opened. Inside waited the Vampire Council. 12 ancient beings. Each powerful enough to destroy cities. Each old enough to remember empires rising and falling. And every single one staring at Lena. The eldest council member spoke first. "So, the human who awakened royal blood." His voice sounded like dry leaves and grave dirt. Lena stood straighter despite fear clawing inside her chest. Adrian stepped forward. "She is under my protection." The council member smiled thinly. "That is exactly the problem." Another council member leaned forward. "The prophecy is clear, Adrian. The chosen human either stabilizes royal blood, or destroys it." Lena whispered, "Prophecy?" Marcus stepped beside her quietly. "Long ago," he murmured, "a human woman bonded with a vampire king. She ended a civil war, but her death shattered royal blood stability for centuries." Lena swallowed. "So, I could hurt him?" Marcus didn't answer. Because the truth was worse. She could change their entire species. The council leader spoke again. "Kill the girl. End the risk." The words fell like a death sentence. Adrian didn't hesitate. "No. Not loud. Not emotional. Absolute." Power exploded through the chamber. Torches bent sideways. Stone cracked. Several council members flinched. Because a vampire king had just openly defied council authority. Something that hadn't happened in 700 years. "You would risk our entire race," one council member hissed, "for a human?" Adrian's voice dropped into something ancient. "I would end anyone who tried to harm her." The room went silent. Because they knew he meant it. Then suddenly, Lena stepped forward. "Wait." Everyone turned. Even Adrian. Her hands trembled. But her voice didn't. "You're afraid of what I might become," she said quietly. The council watched carefully. "Yes," one answered. She took a slow breath. "I won't let myself be something that destroys him. Or anyone." The eldest council member narrowed his eyes. "Intentions mean nothing. Power changes people." Lena looked at Adrian. Then back at them. "Then test me." Marcus inhaled sharply. Because there was only one test they could mean. The blood resonance trial. She survived it. She was bound to royal blood forever. He failed. It would kill her. Adrian grabbed her wrist. "No." She turned to him. "If I don't do this, they will never stop hunting me." His jaw clenched. Because she was right. The council prepared the ritual circle. Ancient symbols carved into black stone. Silver bowls filled with royal blood. The air thick with power. Lena stepped into the circle. Adrian stood just outside it, looking like a man watching his entire world balance on a knife edge. Marcus had never seen fear like that on his king's face. The ritual began. Blood rose from the bowls, floating, glowing dark red and gold. It moved toward Lena. Testing. Searching. Judging. Pain exploded through her chest. She gasped. Dropped to her knees. Memories flooded her mind that weren't hers. Ancient wars. Ancient love. Ancient loss. And then, the blood turned gold. The entire chamber froze. Because gold meant acceptance. Royal acceptance. Not corruption. Not destruction. Balance. The blood flowed into her skin like light. Her eyes flashed gold again. But this time, they stayed that way for several seconds. When it ended, Lena collapsed. Adrian caught her before she hit the floor. "Lena. Lena, look at me." Her eyes opened slowly. Still human. Still her. The council stood in stunned silence. The eldest spoke finally. "The prophecy is fulfilled." He bowed. To her. Hours later, as dawn touched the mountain peaks, Adrian stood with Lena on the estate balcony. The world looked peaceful. For the first time in days. "You almost died," he said quietly. She smiled weakly. "You did too." He exhaled softly. "I have lived 1,000 years." He turned to face her fully. "And never once felt fear like I did tonight." She stepped closer. "You won't face it alone again." Below them, Marcus watched from the shadows. And allowed himself, for the first time in centuries, to feel hope. Across the world, hidden enemies retreated. Because now it wasn't just a king they faced. It was a king and the woman fate itself had chosen for him. And somewhere deep inside Lena's chest, royal blood and human heart beat together. Perfectly balanced. Because sometimes, The world doesn't need another ruler. Sometimes it needs someone kind enough to remind power what it's supposed to protect.